My best friend announced at her wedding, thanks to everyone except my maid of honor who tried to steal my fiancé. Everyone stared at me. I was shocked. Then I pulled out my phone and played a voicemail. It was her fiancé, propositioning me multiple times. I'd been saving them to protect her. The crystal flute of Dom Perignon in my hand felt suddenly heavy, a leaden weight that threatened to snap the fragile stem as the silence in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel expanded to fill every cubic inch of the space. It was October 14th, exactly 7:12 p.m., and 300 guests were staring at me with a collective expression of horrified titillation. Jessica, my best friend of 17 years, stood at the head table, the microphone in her manicured hand, her knuckles white, her other hand gripping the shoulder of her new husband, Mark. She looked ethereal in her Vera Wang gown, a dress that had cost $12,000, of which I had quietly covered the final $3,000 deposit when her card was declined at the final fitting, but her face was twisted into a mask of triumphant malice. She had just delivered the line that severed nearly 2 decades of loyalty. "I want to thank everyone for coming," she had said, her voice trembling with a curated fragility that I recognized from years of drama classes we took together at NYU. "My parents, for their support. Mark's family, for welcoming me. Everyone, except my maid of honor, who tried to steal my fiancé 3 weeks before the wedding." The accusation hung in the air, a toxic vapor. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I could feel the blood draining from my face, not from guilt, but from the sheer, concussive shock of the betrayal. Beside me, the best man, a fraternity brother of Mark's named David, who worked in hedge funds and had spent the cocktail hour trying to impress me with his watch collection, scooted his chair away a noticeable 6 inches. The murmur began then, a low ripple of whispers that sounded like cicadas in late summer. Did she really? I always thought she was jealous. Poor Jessica. I looked at Mark. He was looking down at the tablecloth, feigning the discomfort of a loyal partner who had been aggrieved, playing the part of the devoted husband who had resisted the siren's call. But I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. It was a micro-expression of duping delight. He was enjoying this. He was watching the destruction of my reputation with the same detached amusement he displayed when firing junior analysts. I sat there, frozen in the amber of my own humiliation, and felt the tectonic plates of my reality shift. This was the hook, the moment the ground opened up. But to understand why I didn't run, why I didn't cry, and why I didn't throw the champagne in her face, you have to understand the context. You have to understand the 17 years of forensic accounting that constituted our friendship. Jessica and I met during freshman orientation. I was the scholarship student from Ohio, studying data science and economics. She was the daughter of a real estate developer from Connecticut, studying art history. From the beginning, the dynamic was set in stone. She was the star, and I was the orbit. She was the chaos, and I was the cleanup crew. When she overspent her allowance sophomore year, I showed her how to budget, though she never listened. When she failed her midterms, I created the study guides. When she got her heart broken by a lacrosse player junior year, I was the one who drove her to the beach at 2 a.m. and listened to her cry until the sun came up. I was the validator. I was the one who confirmed her reality, who told her she was beautiful, who told her she was right. And in exchange, I got to be adjacent to her shine. It is a seductive transaction for a quiet girl who feels invisible. But over the years, the cost of the subscription had risen. I am a senior risk analyst for a major fintech firm now. My job is to look at patterns, identify anomalies, and predict catastrophic failures before they happen. I should have applied that rigor to my personal life, but love, even platonic love, is a blinder. When Jessica met Mark 2 years ago, I was happy for her. Mark was 34, a vice president at a private equity firm, charming, wealthy, and seemingly devoted. He bought her gifts. He took us all out to dinner at Le Bernardin and insisted on paying the bill, which came to over $800 for 3 people. He seemed perfect. But my analyst brain noticed things, small discrepancies, the way his eyes lingered on the waitress a second too long, the way he would make a joke at Jessica's expense, then claim she was too sensitive when she got upset. The gaslighting was subtle, a slow drip of poison. I dismissed it. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted to believe that she had finally found the stability she craved. Then came the wedding planning. It was a military operation of extravagance. Jessica wanted a fairy tale, but she didn't have the budget for the monarchy. Mark was paying for the venue, but Jessica was responsible for the details, a category that somehow ballooned to $50,000. She came to me in tears in February. "I can't ask my dad for more money," she had sobbed into her Pinot Grigio. "Mark will think I'm irresponsible." So I stepped in. I always stepped in. I paid the vendor deposits. I paid for the bachelorette party in Tulum, $4,200 for the villa rental, because Jessica wanted the one with the private chef. I told myself it was a gift. I told myself I was the maid of honor and this was my duty. But the real trouble didn't start with the money. It started with the text messages. The first one arrived on April 12th at 11:42 p.m. I was in bed, reading a report on market volatility. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. "Jess is asleep, thinking about you. You looked incredible in that blue dress at dinner." I read it 3 times. It was ambiguous enough to be deniable, but specific enough to be inappropriate. I didn't reply. I assumed he was drunk. I assumed it was a slip. I categorized it as an outlier data point. 2 weeks later, another text. May 4th, 10:15 p.m. "Jess is great, but she's not intellectual. Like you. I feel like we could really talk." talk. I replied this time. I wrote, Mark, Jessica is my best friend. You're marrying her. Go to sleep. He replied with a thumbs up emoji. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had set the boundary. I was naive. The escalation was linear and aggressive. In June, at the engagement party, Mark cornered me in the kitchen while Jessica was opening gifts. He stood too close, invading my personal space, his breath smelling of scotch. You know, he whispered, leaning in. You're the one running this show. You're the competent one. I like competent women. I moved away. Mark, stop, I said, my voice low and steely. You're drunk, he laughed, a low, cold sound. And you're uptight. Loosen up, Sarah. We're going to be family. I went home that night and sat in the dark, debating what to do. If I told Jessica, she would accuse me of lying. She would say I was jealous. That was her pattern. Whenever a boyfriend had hit on me in the past and it had happened twice, she blamed me. She said I was giving off vibes. She said I was trying to compete with her. I knew that if I spoke up without undeniable proof, I would lose her. And worse, I would ruin her wedding. I decided to wait. I decided to adopt the strategy of containment. I would avoid Mark. I would keep records. I would get through the wedding, let her have her day, and then, perhaps, slowly distance myself. I thought I was being noble. I thought I was protecting her. But the predator does not stop just because the prey is silent. The discovery phase began in earnest on July 20th. It was a Thursday. Jessica was out of town at her parents' house for a dress fitting. I was at my office, working late. My phone rang at 9:14 p.m. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again, 5 times in 10 minutes. Finally, a voicemail notification appeared. I didn't listen to it immediately. I finished my spreadsheet. I saved my work. Then, I put on my headphones. The message was 2 minutes and 14 seconds long. It was not ambiguous. It was graphic. Mark was drunk, yes, but he was articulate. He described in vivid, nauseating detail what he wanted to do to me. He compared me to Jessica. He said, Jess is a trophy, Sarah. You're the prize. I'm marrying her because it looks good on the portfolio. But I want you. Come over. She's gone. Come to the apartment. My hand shook as I transcribed the message into a Word document. I saved the audio file to my cloud drive. I backed it up to an external hard drive. This was actionable intelligence. This was the smoking gun, but I still hesitated. We were 3 months out from the wedding. The invitations had gone out. The deposits were non-refundable. I looked at the calendar. If I told her now, the explosion would be nuclear. She would be humiliated publicly. The sunk costs were massive. I made a calculation, a flawed, sentimental calculation. I decided to hold the evidence. I decided that I would protect her from the truth until she was legally bound, or perhaps I would never tell her if he stopped. It was a coward's bargain. I see that now, but I didn't want to be the one to detonate her life. I assumed that eventually she would see him for who he was. I didn't expect him to realize that I was a threat. I didn't anticipate that a narcissist, sensing rejection, would launch a preemptive strike. Mark must have realized that I wasn't going to play along. He must have realized that I had evidence, and like any good strategist facing a liability, he decided to control the narrative. He must have begun planting the seeds weeks ago. A comment here, a sigh there. Sarah's been acting weird around me, Jess. I think Sarah hit on me when you were in the bathroom. I don't want to make a scene, but I think your friend is jealous. He groomed her. He weaponized her insecurity against my loyalty. And because Jessica always needed to be the victim, because she always needed a villain to make her the heroine, she believed him. She swallowed the lie because it tasted better than the truth. The truth was that her fiancé was a cheater. The lie was that she was so desirable that even her best friend couldn't resist her man. She chose the lie. And now, here we were. The Plaza Hotel. The chandeliers glittering like diamonds above a slaughterhouse. Jessica was still holding the microphone. Tears glistening in her eyes. Tears that were likely 50% real pain and 50% performance for the videographer who was zooming in on her tragic face. It breaks my heart, Jessica continued, her voice gaining strength, feeding off the crowd's sympathy. I invited her here today because I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to forgive, but looking at her now, I just can't. I can't have that negative energy in my life. She pointed a finger at me, a perfectly manicured French-tipped finger. Sarah, I think you should leave. The room erupted in hushed gasps. This was the climax of her drama. She was casting me out. She was the queen exiling the traitor. The waiters stopped moving. The band had lowered their instruments. Every eye in the room, 300 pairs, was fixed on me. I felt the heat rising in my chest, a physical manifestation of the adrenaline flooding my system. My fight-or-flight response was triggering, but my training overrode it. In risk management, when a system fails, you do not panic. You audit. You review the logs. You present the data. I looked at Mark. He was smirking. A full, undeniable smirk. He thought he had won. He thought I would run away in shame, weeping, creating a scene that would validate their story. He thought I was the weak link. He forgot who I was. He forgot that for 17 years, I was the one who kept the receipts. I was the one who remembered the passwords. I was the one who backed up the files. I reached into my clutch. My hand was steady now. The tremor was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I pulled out my phone. It was an iPhone 15 Pro, fully charged. I unlocked it. I didn't stand up yet. I just looked at the device. I tapped the Voice Memos app. I tapped the folder labeled Evidence. I saw the file, Mark, voicemail, July 20, M4A. I also saw the other files, Mark, voicemail, August 12, M4A. Mark, voicemail, September 5, M4A. He hadn't stopped. He had escalated, and I had saved every single second. I looked up at the head table. table. I looked Jessica in the eye. She flinched. She saw something in my face that she hadn't seen in 17 years. She saw the end of my servitude. She saw the auditor. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the parquet floor. The sound was like a gavel strike. I didn't walk toward the door. I walked toward the AV booth, located 10 feet to my right, where a nervous sound engineer named Kevin was monitoring the levels. I knew Kevin. I had tipped him $100 earlier to ensure the slideshow of Jessica's childhood photos ran smoothly. I walked up to him. The room watched, confused. They thought I was going to make a scene, scream, maybe attack her. "Sarah, get out." Jessica shouted into the mic, her voice shrill now, losing its curated softness. "Security," Mark yelled, standing up, suddenly realizing that the variable he hadn't accounted for was moving in an unexpected direction. I reached the booth. I held up an auxiliary cable that was sitting on the console. I looked at Kevin. "Plug this in," I said. My voice was calm, authoritative. It was the voice I used when presenting quarterly losses to the board of directors. Kevin hesitated. I can't. "Plug it in," I repeated, "or I will sue this company for the $3,000 I personally paid for the lighting package." It was a bluff, mostly, but it worked. Kevin, terrified and confused, plugged the cable into my phone. I turned up the volume on my device to the maximum. I looked back at the head table. Mark was scrambling around the table, knocking over a wine glass. "Cut the sound," he screamed. "Cut the mic." But it wasn't the mic. It was the house system. I pressed play. The speakers, high-quality JBL line arrays designed to fill the room with orchestral music, crackled to life. And then Mark's voice, booming, unmistakable, slurring slightly, filled the Plaza Hotel. "Jess is a trophy, Sarah. You're the prize. I want you. Come over. She's gone." The silence that followed the first sentence was absolute. It was a vacuum. And then I let it play on. I let the graphic descriptions roll over the crowd like a tidal wave of filth. I let him describe exactly what he wanted to do to the maid of honor. I let him insult Jessica's intelligence. I let him laugh about how easy she was to manipulate. Mark froze halfway to the booth. He looked like a statue of panic. Jessica stood on the stage, the microphone dropping from her hand, hitting the table with a deafening thud that the speakers picked up, punctuating the recording. I stood by the sound booth, my hand on my phone, my face impassive. I wasn't the maid of honor anymore. I was the whistleblower, and the audit was just beginning. The voice memo ended with the distinct digital click of Mark hanging up a sound that echoed off the hand-painted frescoes of the grand ballroom ceiling like a gunshot. For 3 seconds, the room was a tableau of paralyzed wealth. The only movement was the condensation sliding down the champagne flutes of 300 stunned guests. Then, Mark moved. He didn't turn to Jessica to comfort her. He lunged toward the AV booth, his face a rictus of panic, his eyes wide and white. "Turn it off," he screamed, his voice cracking, stripping away the smooth baritone of the confident executive. "It's a fake. It's AI. She used AI to clone my voice." It was a desperate, thoroughly modern defense, the last refuge of a man caught in high definition. I didn't flinch. I looked at the crowd, then at Jessica, whose hands were trembling so violently that the microphone she had dropped was vibrating against the table leg. "It is not AI, I said, my voice projecting clearly even without a microphone because the room was so deadly silent. "It is a voicemail from July 20th, received at 9:14 p.m. I have the carrier metadata, I have the IP logs, and I have 3 more from August." I held up the phone again, the screen glowing like a beacon. "Shall I play the one where you discuss the prenup strategy? The one where you call Jessica's father a cash cow?" Mark stopped dead. He looked at his father-in-law, Mr. Sterling, a man worth $200 million, who was slowly standing up at table 1. Mr. Sterling's face was a terrifying shade of purple. He didn't look at me. He looked at the man he had just spent $500,000 to welcome into his family. "You said what?" Mr. Sterling rumbled, his voice low and dangerous. The focus of the room shifted instantly. The social gravity moved from the jealous maid of honor to the fraudulent groom. Jessica, realizing the narrative had escaped her control, finally reacted. She didn't faint. She didn't cry. She turned to Mark and slapped him. It wasn't a theatrical slap. It was a clumsy, violent strike that caught him on the ear. "You idiot," she shrieked. "You ruined my wedding." Note the phrasing. "Not times you broke my heart, asterisk. Not times you cheated on me, asterisk. Asterisk. You ruined my wedding, asterisk." Even in the face of infidelity, her priority was the production value. The chaos that ensued was absolute. Guests began to stand, murmuring, pulling out phones to record the meltdown. Mark was trying to explain to Mr. Sterling that it was a prank. Jessica was screaming at Mark. The officiant looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. I didn't stay to watch the debris land. I had delivered the payload. The audit was complete. I unplugged my phone from the auxiliary cable, gave a nod to Kevin the sound guy, who looked equal parts terrified and impressed, and turned on my heel. I walked down the center aisle, the same aisle I had walked down 20 minutes earlier, holding a bouquet of hydrangeas. The guests parted like the Red Sea. They stared at me with a mixture of fear and awe. I caught the eye of David, the best man, who was still sitting with his mouth open. I paused for a fraction of a second. "Nice watch, David," I said softly. "It's a fake, by the way. The bezel is off." I didn't wait for his reaction. I pushed through the double doors and out into the lobby. The air in the plaza lobby smelled of lilies and old money. I walked out the front revolving doors onto 5th Avenue. It was raining. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't care. I hailed a cab, got in, and gave my address in Brooklyn. As the taxi pulled rolled away, leaving the scene of the crime behind. I felt a vibration in my hand. My phone, a notification from American Express. Asterisk charge of $3,000 pending. Plaza Hotel final balance. Asterisk Jessica had authorized the final payment on my card earlier that day because her limit was maxed, promising to Venmo me. I looked at the notification. I tapped the dispute charge button. Reason. Asterisk services not rendered. Fraudulent transaction. Asterisk I locked the phone. The ride home was silent. I watched the city blur past, the adrenaline slowly metabolizing into a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I went into my apartment, took off the silk bridesmaid dress, sage green, a color that washed me out, chosen by Jessica for that exact reason, and put it in the trash. Not the donation bin. The trash. I took a shower, scrubbing the hairspray and the Plaza off my skin. I put on sweatpants. I poured a glass of cheap wine, and then I opened my laptop. The aftermath had begun, and unlike Jessica, I prepared for contingencies. I logged into my social media accounts. I knew what was coming. Jessica would spin this. She would say the recording was fake. She would say I was a hacker. She would say I was mentally unstable. I needed to control the record. But as I opened Instagram, I saw that the viral machine had already beaten me to it. A guest, a cousin of Mark's I had never met, had live-streamed the speeches. The video was already circulating on TikTok. The caption read, asterisk maid of honor goes nuclear at Plaza wedding fail number cheater asterisk. It had 10,000 views. By midnight, it had 1 million. The comments were a battlefield, but the sentiment was overwhelmingly on my side. Asterisk, the receipts. She brought receipts. Asterisk, the way she walked out though. Asterisk, the groom saying it's AI is the most 2024 gaslighting ever. Asterisk, I didn't post anything. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. The next morning, the fallout became tangible. My phone was a brick of notifications. 72 missed calls, 40 from Jessica, 20 from Mark, 12 from my own mother, who was likely having a panic attack in Ohio. I ignored them all. I opened my email. There was a message from Venmo. Asterisk, Jessica requests $3,000. Asterisk. The note read, asterisk, you ruined everything. You owe me for the wedding. Asterisk. I laughed. A dry, humorless sound. I declined the request. Then I sent a request to her. Asterisk $4,200. Tulum Villa rental. Pay up. Asterisk I knew she wouldn't pay. But it was about the ledger. It was about the record. Monday morning, I went to work. I expected whispers. I expected stares. I worked in finance. Gossip traveled faster than fiber optics. When I walked onto the trading floor, heads turned, but they didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with respect. In a world governed by data and ruthlessness, I had just executed a perfect hostile takeover of a toxic asset. My boss, a woman named Karen, who had survived the 2008 crash, stopped by my desk. She didn't mention the wedding. She just dropped a file on my desk. The Henderson account, she said. I want you to lead the audit. You seem to have a knack for finding irregularities. It was a promotion. Indirectly, Mark had just boosted my career. Speaking of Mark, the consequences for him were swift and professional. The private equity world is a small club, and Mr. Sterling, Jessica's father, was a platinum member. I learned later, through the grapevine, that Mark was fired on Tuesday. The official reason was restructuring, but everyone knew. You don't humiliate the daughter of a major investor and keep your seat at the table. He was blacklisted. The lease on his apartment in Tribeca was in Jessica's name, co-signed by her father. He was out by Friday. Jessica's fate was more complex. She didn't annul the marriage immediately. In a twist of sunken cost fallacy that only a true narcissist could perform, she tried to stay with him for a month. She posted photos of them working through it, captioned with quotes about forgiveness and Christian grace. She tried to pivot the narrative to love conquers the jealous friend, but the internet never forgets, and the humiliation was too deep. The comments on her posts were brutal. Asterisk, girl, he called you a trophy. Asterisk, he wanted the maid of honor. Asterisk, have some self-respect. Asterisk, she filed for divorce 6 weeks later, but she wasn't done with me. The lawsuit arrived 3 months after the wedding. Asterisk, Jessica Sterling v. Sarah Miller. Asterisk, causes of action: defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy. She was suing me for $5 million. She claimed the recording was obtained illegally. She claimed I had altered it. She claimed I had destroyed her reputation and caused her PTSD. It was a frivolous suit, a tantrum in legal form, funded by her father's deep pockets. She wanted to bleed me dry in legal fees. She wanted me to beg. She forgot that I didn't just keep the voicemails. I kept everything. I called a lawyer, a fierce litigator named Elena, who specialized in digital privacy. I went to her office with my hard drive. I showed her the voicemails. I showed her the texts. And then I showed her the email Mark had sent me from his work account, the one I hadn't played at the wedding, the one where he explicitly stated, I know you're recording calls for work compliance, Sarah, so here's one for the personal archive. He had consented. He had thought it was a flirtatious joke, a nod to my job, but legally, it was consent to be recorded. Elena smiled. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. We're not just going to dismiss this, she said. We're going to countersue for the money you spent on the wedding, for the harassment, and we're going to subpoena Mark. If Jessica wants to go to court, she's going to have to listen to every single second of those tapes on the public record. We filed the motion to dismiss and the countersuit. We attached the transcript of the consent consent email. The response from Jessica's legal team was immediate silence. 2 days later, they offered a settlement. They would drop the suit if I signed an NDA. They wanted to buy my silence. They wanted to bury the story. I sat in my apartment, looking at the offer. It was tempting. It would end the noise. It would let me move on. But then I thought about the 17 years. I thought about the gaslighting. I thought about her standing on that stage, accusing me of betrayal while holding the hand of the man who had propositioned me. An NDA would mean I accepted their version of reality. It would mean the truth was for sale. I picked up my pen. I wrote "rejected" across the offer in thick black ink. I scanned it and sent it back. I wasn't interested in silence. I was interested in the resolution. The court date was set for the following year. I prepared. I organized my files. I continued my life. I went on dates. I traveled to places I wanted to go, not places Jessica wanted to be seen. And then, a week before the deposition, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Mark. He sounded drunk. He sounded broken. "Sarah," he slurred. "Please, tell her to stop. She's crazy. She's trying to ruin me. If you testify, if you release the other tapes, I'll never work again." "You should have thought of that," I said, my voice steady, "before you left a voicemail on an auditor's phone." I hung up. I blocked the number. The final showdown wasn't going to be at a wedding. It was going to be in a courtroom, and I had already written the closing argument. The deposition took place on a Tuesday in November in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building on 6th Avenue that smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. The atmosphere was sterile, pressurized, and incredibly expensive. Across the mahogany table sat Jessica, flanked by 2 attorneys whose suits cost more than my first car. Mark was there too, sitting separately, looking gray and diminished, accompanied by a public defender because, as I correctly surmised, he could no longer afford private counsel. My lawyer, Elena, placed a digital recorder on the table. It was 10 a.m. sharp. Jessica looked tired. The meticulously applied concealer couldn't hide the shadows under her eyes. She glared at me with a mixture of hatred and exhaustion. She wanted this to be over, but her pride and her father's litigious nature had dragged us here. They expected me to crumble under the pressure of the questioning. They expected the jealous best friend to crack. But they were deposing an auditor. I don't crack. I cite sources. When Jessica's lead attorney, a man named Henderson, began his line of questioning, trying to paint me as unstable and obsessive, I answered with monosyllabic precision. "No, yes, I do not recall that characterization." Then, it was Elena's turn to question Mark. "Mr. Reynolds," Elena said, sliding a transcript across the table, "I am directing your attention to Exhibit D. This is a transcription of a voicemail you left for my client on August 12th at 11:43 p.m. In this recording, you discuss your then-fiancée, Jessica Sterling, and her father, Robert Sterling. Is that correct?" Mark looked at the paper. His hands shook. He looked at Mr. Sterling, who was sitting in the corner of the room, ostensibly there to support his daughter, but really there to protect his assets. I plead the fifth," Mark stammered. "This is a civil deposition, Mr. Reynolds," Elena said icily. "You can decline to answer, but the jury will be instructed to draw an adverse inference. Would you like me to play the recording for the room? It clarifies your views on Mr. Pry, Sterling's mediocre intellect, and his cash cow status." The silence in the room was absolute. Mr. Sterling stood up. He walked over to the table and picked up the transcript. He read it. He looked at Mark. Then he looked at Jessica. "Is this accurate?" Mr. Sterling asked, his voice low. "Daddy, it's out of context," Jessica whined, reverting to the voice of a 6-year-old. "She manipulated the files. I have the forensic metadata certification right here." I interjected, sliding another document across the table. "Authenticated by a third-party digital forensics firm. Cost me $2,000, worth every penny." Mr. Sterling looked at me. For the first time in the 17 years I had known him, years where he had treated me like a piece of furniture, in his daughter's life he looked at me with recognition. He saw the competence. He saw the threat. "Henderson," Mr. Sterling said to the lawyer, "we're done." "But sir, we haven't established—" "I said we're done," Mr. Sterling snapped. He turned to me. "What do you want to make this go away? And by go away, I mean the recordings are deleted, the countersuit is dropped, and I never see your face again." "I want my legal fees paid in full," I said immediately. $12,500. I want the $4,200 for the Tulum villa reimbursed. And I want a dismissal of your lawsuit with prejudice, meaning you can never file against me again." "Done," Mr. Sterling said. He pulled out a checkbook. "Daddy, no!" Jessica screamed, standing up. "She ruined my wedding. She humiliated me." "You married an idiot who insulted me on tape," Mr. Sterling said, not even looking at her. "Sarah saved me a fortune in divorce settlements down the line. Sit down, Jessica." He wrote the check. He slid it across the table. $16,700. I picked it up. I checked the date. I checked the signature. "Pleasure doing business," I said. I stood up. I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at Jessica. I walked out of the conference room, took the elevator down 42 floors, and walked into the crisp autumn air of Manhattan. I went directly to the bank and deposited the check. It cleared immediately. The resolution came quietly, not with a bang, but with the steady accumulation of peace. 5 years have passed since the deposition. The rhythm of my life has changed. I am no longer the friend who cleans up messes. I am a vice president of risk management now. I own my apartment in Brooklyn, a brownstone I bought with a down payment I saved meticulously, without anyone's help. I don't track Jessica anymore. I don't need to. But the world is small, and algorithms are aggressive. Occasionally, she pops up on my people you may know no feed. She is remarried. The new husband is older, wealthy, looks a bit tired. Her Instagram is still a curated feed of perfection vacations in Como, gala dinners, perfectly filtered smiles, but I know how to look at the metadata now. I see the strain in the smiles. I see the desperate frequency of the posts, the need for validation that screams louder than any caption. Mark, I heard, moved to Chicago. He works in mid-level sales. He tried to connect with me on LinkedIn once. I blocked him. Last Tuesday, I was at JFK, waiting for a flight to Tokyo for a business trip. I was sitting in the lounge, drinking sparkling water and reading a report. I looked up and saw her, Jessica. She was standing at the counter, arguing with the gate agent. She looked glamorous, wearing a cashmere coat and oversized sunglasses, but her voice carried that familiar, shrill edge of entitlement. Do you know who I am? She was saying. I demand an upgrade. I watched her for a moment. 5 years ago, my instinct would have been to rush over, to soothe her, to fix it, to pay for the upgrade myself, just to stop the scene. I took a sip of my water. I turned back to my report. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph. I felt the profound, weightless sensation of indifference. She was just a data point that had been removed from my dataset, an anomaly that had been corrected. I boarded my plane. I turned my phone to airplane mode, and as the jet lifted off, banking over the city where I had lost a best friend and found myself, I closed my eyes and calculated the net worth of my freedom. It was infinite. The audit was closed. The books were balanced, and for the first time in my life, I was operating in the black.